So here we go with urbanization. Now we have other organizations now to help immigrants besides the ones that we mentioned, the political machine, because they're always going to want to favor, and we don't really want to go and do that. Now the song I have for you here is an 80s classic. It's called Our House by Madness. So if you want to go look at that and see how things were kind of hustling and bustling in an inner city at the time, maybe makes sense. But Our House has an allusion to something else here, and I will cover that for you in a minute. So the first thing that came out was called the social gospel movement. Now when you think of gospel, you think of a church, and that's actually pretty good. Social gospel is basically take the ideas of Christianity and apply them to solving society's problems, hence social gospel. So I'm going to talk about a couple of writers here and what they really focused on, and then we'll kind of move into another aspect of the social gospel movement. Now, one big writer was named Charles Sheldon. He wrote a book called In His Steps. Now, his is capitalized, so he's talking about Jesus here. This is kind of what would Jesus do. Jesus comes down and he's going to solve these problems. So he's again trying to take Christian principles to solve society's problems. It comes back in the 80s. We call it the moral majority, but it's here, okay? Now, another man, his name is Walter Rauschenbusch. That's fun to say, isn't it? He actually writes something called The Social Principles of Jesus. And now he's trying to basically take what Jesus taught and say how society should act if they are to follow those. The Golden Rule, the Ten Commandments, things like that. So these men are basically trying to solve society's problems. Now, as part of that social gospel movement, but it also can be a movement by itself, we have the settlement house. And here's my allusion to Our House. Now, a settlement house, as you can tell, sometimes had a lot of children, things like that, and they were run by young, educated women. And so these settlement houses were to give services and to also give job opportunities and training and education to these young immigrants so they could go and find a job. Okay? Now, the big one here, the settlement house, her name was Jane Addams, and she had something called the Hull House in Chicago. This was a major settlement house in Chicago. It ran for many, many years, and it taught a lot of these immigrant children how to read so that they could go and assimilate in the classroom and make friends and all these different things, okay? So those are those two things there. Now, the last thing here about this immigration is the Ashcan School of Art. Now, the Ashcan School of Art, as you can tell, depicted a lot of the societies in New York City and exposed people to how the immigrants were living. Because remember, immigrants thought, oh, I'm going to come here and I'm going to make all this money. It's a golden door. And then they realized, it might have been better just staying back home and taking my chances. So that was Ashcan School of Art. This was kind of a general scene just of New York City. You have clothes out there, you have the dirty streets and different things like that. Now there is one more video in this segment, and that's going to be about the culture around the turn of the century, around the 1900s.